Welcome, everyone, to a very interesting show tonight, which I'm doing at 7 o'clock on Saturday night in the U.S. because it's 10 o'clock in Australia. And this lady over here, Kathleen Folbigg, is the case that we're really looking at, and it is an Australian case. Now, before I get going, please do tell me, are you seeing and hearing everything clearly? And are there pixelated stuff going on like last time? How about pixels, Lisa? It drives me crazy when later on I find out the transmission sucked, but hopefully it will not, and I can go along and people will be able to see me and not be frustrated. All right. Okay, you can all stop telling me you can see me. Okay, so here we go. Before I start, let me do the needful, because you know I got to do the needful, which is supporting the channel, because that's what you have to do to try to keep these shows going. There's a number of things you can do right here in the middle. Whoops, there's the middle. Please just subscribe. Be a subscriber. That helps immensely. Like the show, share it with your friends, and hit the bell for notifications so you get to come and see the next shows. Over here, we have Patreon. If you like the Hangouts that are in the middle of the week, hey, wait, first of all, you can just join Patreon, and at the first level, just support the channel, and we appreciate it. Actually, it's just me, so I appreciate it. And maybe my subscribers appreciate it. And everybody who wants to learn about profiling appreciates it. So that's the first level. On the second level, that's called Friends of Profiling with Pat Brown. And you get to come to the Hangout midweek and ask me any questions you want and just hang out with other people who are interested. It's a small group, so I have more opportunities to answer any questions you have. And if you can't even make it, you can send the question to me and I'll answer it during that hour anyway. And then it will be later broadcast and everyone can watch it and you can see the answer, but it really helps support the channel. Or a one-time thing, $2.99 at Amazon in the link below. A great story I wrote. It's a psychological mystery. Can't lose that way. You get a story and you support the channel. Okay, done with that. Let's move on to our show today. And these are the three women I'm going to be talking about. Kathleen Folbigg, and I hope I pronounce the names correctly, from Australia. And then in the middle, I can't do the middle here. The middle, that's Marybeth Tinning, who's probably the most famous case of a person who killed their children, and it's called Munchausen Syndrome by Proxy. And over here, we have Lacey Spears. Only one child died, and she was convicted of that. All of these women were convicted. I'm not saying they were convicted correctly or safely. I'm just saying they were convicted. We'll get to the issues in a little bit. Lacey only killed one, but it still comes under the same concept of killing your own children. And now the question people have is about women killing children. And before I even go there about that, I just want to talk about humans in general. You know how in society, the powerful people in society, the rich people in society look out for the lesser people in society, the poorer people, the struggling people. You know how they watch out over orphans and widows, and how they take care of all the people who aren't doing as well as them. And you know how in a marriage between a man and a woman, the man always takes care of his wife, because in all of history, the man has been the physically stronger person and possibly the more economically stable person, enabling him to go out and make money and take care of his family. So of course, being that stronger person, physically and economically, he will take care of his wife. He will coddle her. He will make sure she's happy. He will never harm her. He will always be sweet to her. And now I'm seeing, like, if I could see, I'm seeing people throwing darts at me going, what the hell are you talking about? That's not the way society works. I mean, really? The powerful take care of the weak and all men take care of their wives and don't hurt them and abuse them? What are you talking about? That's my whole point. What am I talking about? You got women. Who are they stronger than? Who can they, if they want to cause harm, if they want to have power and control, if they want attention, who are they going to go after? Well, children, because children are the weaker ones and in their care and have not as much say in what goes on, maybe no say at all. That's why we also see nurses that kill patients. That's why we see anesthesiologists kill patients, because those patients are usually elderly, or they're very sick, or they're they're completely out because they've got anesthesia in them. And you can kill them. You can get the thrill of power and control without having to be physically strong. So it comes down to this. A predator always goes after prey that he can beat. Prey that he can beat. That's what a predator does. You'll notice that with serial killers, for example, you don't see a 5'2", 100-pound man going after a 6'4" MMA female. He's not going to pick her because he might lose. So he's going to pick somebody smaller than him. He'll go after a 14-year-old who's walking home from school, or maybe a child walking home from school. So a predator always picks on someone they can control and that they can beat. And that's why we have females attacking children, because they're easy to beat. And the second reason is they're available, because you have to have something available to you. Now, for some serial killers, they get their victims by, let's say, hiding in bushes and grabbing joggers, or they might drive along and get a hitchhiker to get in their car, or maybe a prostitute, and then they kill them. Of course, again, as I was saying, suppose you work on the midnight shift at a nursing home. Well, you've got an 85-year-old woman lying in the bed. Pretty easy to kill and very available. Now, when women have children, they're available and they're alone with them many, many hours a day. So their opportunity is there as well. They have the availability and the opportunity. So that's why women might choose to kill their own children. And from here, I want to talk about the issue of what's wrong with them. And it's very, very interesting how we give a lot of leeway to women, because we, for some reason, feel that because they're mothers, they have more empathy. Because they're supposed to care for children, they have more empathy and motherliness in their heart. Well, maybe with many, but not with all, because if you don't have empathy, if that's not even a part of your makeup, you're not going to have empathy towards your children either. So what's really interesting is I'm going to show you a couple of books. There's a book called Serial Murders, Future Implications for Police Investigations. Guess what's not in here? Women who kill their children. There's another one, Psychology of Serial Murder. Doesn't include women who kill their children. Serial Killer Investigations. All these are really good books, by the way. That's why I own them, because it's very important when a police go and work on serial crimes, especially stranger serial crimes, would you have sexual homicides. Very important books. Women aren't in them, unless they're Aileen Wuornos. She gets like, Aileen Wuornos, see, she's a female serial killer. Yeah, well, because she picked up men and shot them. So that worked for them. Again, another one of the best books on catching serial killers. You see? But you got the knife here going. You got a guy who's a wonderful book, by the way, by Earl James, a detective, and it's not even available anymore. So I'm like, I hold on to this book dearly. One of the best books ever written, but women are not included. And there's a reason they're not included. It's because women are rarely recognized as being serial killers, especially when they're not helping a male, like a duo, a male-female team picking up women and killing them. And even then, if you look at like Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka in Canada, she even just says, I was just an abused woman. He was a serial killer. I just had no choice. No. Yes, she did. But now she's free because somebody believed that garbage. So let me read you something about why the women get away with this. This is a really good book, by the way. And I don't have many true crime books, but this one's good. From Cradle to Grave. It is about Marybeth Tinning. And it's really well written and has very good information in it. And unlike many serial killer books, which spend all their time being gory as they can get, and so everybody's like, oh, God, he's so creepy. This is actually very interesting, more of a methodical but very interesting look at what happened with Marybeth Tinning. Let me read you something in it, which I think is just fascinating. So this is a statement from DeMaio, who is a really good forensic pathologist. He said some of these deaths get described as SIDS, but that's a waste paper basket diagnosis. All it means is that you have a dead child and no obvious cause of death. Forensically, we know that some babies are murdered, but their deaths go unnoticed. And here's some more. People in hospitals, for example, and other places like juries, for example, they think that all mothers care about their children and find it very difficult to accept that some mothers don't. Here's something else he said. Even if the women confess to this, very few of them get prosecuted because this is the kind of case which the prosecution can easily lose. And DAs don't like to lose cases. So the legal profession isn't doing much about pursuing mothers who kill babies, and some of them are getting away with it. And a lot of that reasoning is because of the jury system. Because when you put jurors, generally speaking, they find it very hard to understand. You've got deaths which are hard to explain. Like the children died. There could be SIDS deaths. There could be smothering, but smothering children, little babies, doesn't usually show anything up in the autopsy. So they don't know which way to go with it, except for maybe the behaviors of the female who is being prosecuted. So it's a risky case to take to court. So a good portion of time they just don't do it. And also to bring up that, this is a book on offender profiling. Again, the women are kind of left out of here when it comes down to killing their children. And one of the problems is in the hospitals and in the police, a lot of people do not recognize the type of offender that does this. Even if that offender is saying really strange things and it's kind of like really creepy, and you're like, wait a minute, that's not a normal thing to say. Even then, the problem is they don't recognize that person as an offender. They haven't gotten training in doing that. I want to point out something else that was said. If I can find it. Oh, what I do with it? There's a really cool one. This is also DeMaio. Okay, about people thinking mothers always care about their children. A forensic psychiatrist has a different, scientist. A forensic scientist has a different approach. In my job, I see a murder a day, and I can pick up on a case like this in 30 seconds. I would be able to recognize when a mother has been killing her children while the standard physician would be shaking his head and saying, this could not be. And so because there is such a lack of understanding about this kind of offender, doctors don't recognize it. Police don't recognize it. And then if the police and the doctors can't recognize it, goodness gracious, do you think juries are going to be so good? Now, admittedly, you're going to sit there and say now, well, there are 3 women right behind me who all got convicted. They did. And some were very obvious, but some took also really long time. And I'm going to get to all 3 stories in just a second, but I want to point out something about what we call women who kill children. The typical term is Munchausen Syndrome by proxy. Now, Munchausen Syndrome is when a person harms themselves or pretends to have illnesses to get attention. And Munchausen Syndrome by proxy is when a person does it to their children to get attention. Sometimes just taking them to the doctor repeatedly. This woman here, for example, a great example of Munchausen Syndrome by proxy, where she went over and over and over and over again to the doctor until her poor child had been in the hospital most of his life. And then there's the people who call Munchausen Syndrome by proxy, but they kill their children to get attention. And we'll go here to Marybeth Tinning on that, because 9 of her children died. One seems to be natural, became ill, and the other 8 is believed that she killed the next 8. That's a lot of children to kill and not be called a serial killer and not have people catch on. So what is it with the women who have this problem? Now, it's funny because, again, the classification usually isn't serial killer. And if you look at this is the FBI book, Crime Classification Manual. This is by John Douglas, Ann Burgess, and Robert Ressler. Lots of good stuff in here. I'm not knocking the whole book. But let's go to the one that's about women killing their children. You know what it's called? This one I kind of find it really weird. Spontaneous domestic homicide. Spontaneous. Okay. A spontaneous domestic homicide is unstaged, and it is triggered either by a recent stressful event or by a cumulative buildup of stress. And it goes on to talk about women who kill their children. Spontaneous and caused by stress. Okay, so, it's very true that serial killers in general kill when they feel a loss of power and control. Their marriage crashes and burns, they lose their job, and they go out and rape and murder. Do we call that a spontaneous crime? Or do we think it's premeditated? The dude's a psychopath and he's gone out and he's brutally murdered somebody. He's planned this. He may not have planned it for a really long time, and it may be because he is stressed out. But since when is that sort of an excuse? Spontaneous. I'm a mother and I got, the child really wore me out, or I just, my husband left me and so I had to kill my kid. No, I mean, that makes no sense. Also, here's another example of this. This one is from another very excellent book, Criminal Profiling by Brent Turvey. He calls it domestic child homicide. And I find there's some really interesting things here. It says a domestic child homicide occurs when a caretaker kills a child. Yeah, okay. And then they go on to say that, okay, where's this, the thing that I really want to point out? Where did it go? Suffering. Okay, the word suffering, keep that in mind because that is used a lot when it comes to women. They're suffering from something. When was the last time you heard that a male serial killer who killed 10 women was suffering from spontaneous serial murder? He wasn't suffering from that. We just say the guy is an evil psychopath, but these women are all suffering. So that's what they say. For example, they'll say here, this is Yvonne Padron. 22-year-old Yvonne Padron accepted a plea bargain, pleading guilty to a reduced charge of injury to a child. Now, again, a lot of times women's charges also get lowered. And you'll see this with these cases too. She was originally charged with capital murder for suffocating her 21-year-old daughter, Jessica. She confessed to suffocating her daughter, which is a premeditated homicide. It's not accidental. It's not like they were having a fight and she pushed the person and they fell and hit themselves. When you put a pillow over your kid's face, you're kind of murdering them. She allegedly suffered from Munchausen Syndrome by proxy, a disorder whose victims require inordinate amounts of attention and sympathy. It's a syndrome she suffers from, and she needed treatment and care. So the concept is it's a mental disorder, not an evil thing, not a psychopathic way of thinking. And because of that, a lot of these women many times will end up getting kind of mental health type of things that can be treated. And guess what? You can't treat it because Munchausen syndrome by proxy is not treatable. It is psychopathy. Psychopaths can't be treated. They can be manipulated, but they can't be treated. Let me read you something about, I just want to point this out. I wrote this down. This concept of spontaneous domestic homicide brought on by stressor. So in other words, if you are just Munchausen syndrome and you just hurt yourself or pretend that you are sick to get attention, is that like rape for the male rapist? And then if you kill your children, is that like a sexual homicide for a man? I mean, are these different gradations that we have? If you don't kill somebody, we'll just call it Munchausen syndrome. If you kill somebody, then, we go on. These are labels that are really, really questionable. Now, so here, let's look at a real description of Munchausen syndrome. There's a couple of them that are just fascinating. Now, I don't know how many of you are familiar with what's called the DSM-4 or DSM-5. Now we're on DSM-5. What is the DSM? It's called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. And now we have the 5th edition. At least I think we have the 5th edition. And they have all these different disorders in the mental disorders. And they used to have, which is kind of funny, they used to have, hold on a second. Stop doing that. Don't do that. Don't do that. Okay. They used to have two, let's see, DSM-4 had 172 disorders. DSM-5 is down to 157. So I don't know what happened to, a dozen and a half of those disorders. They threw them out. And the 157 disorders, and I don't believe there's 157 disorders. I believe there's 157 oftentimes manifestations. And here's what a guy said, which I thought was brilliant. The listing of disorders in a diagnostic and statistical manual is highly misleading. Many of these, and he does quotes, disorders are behavioral manifestations. Exactly. And there's no organic or physical reason for that diagnosis that supports that. Certain behaviors are mistaken for symptoms and often lead to erroneous diagnoses. Many others result in a diagnosis after a period of psychopharmaceutical intervention and blah, 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 blah. We should not concern ourselves too much with the number of disorders, but the quality of the evidence that describes them. Many are plainly farcical. And that I truly believe. I believe that, for example, Munchausen Syndrome is no syndrome. It's a behavior that is brought on by psychopathy. So if you're a psychopath, you kind of get to decide which way you want to get power and control. It could be, if you're a dude, you might recently kill your wife and children because you want to go off with a new person. That's a psychopath, but his behavior is killing his family off so he can have his new life. If you're a serial killer, it might be rape and homicide, or it just might be rape, maybe just a rapist, because that's enough to get you off, you know what I mean? And you enjoy that. And you also know you get less time in prison if you get caught and you don't have as many, well, you do leave a live witness, so she might rat you out. But, you don't have to kill people. I'm not a killer. I just rape people. Yeah. So a psychopath has ways of doing things. Now, it could be a psychopath isn't even violent. That psychopath could be a businessman. That psychopath could be a teacher. That psychopath could be a pastor. The psychopath could be a politician. We got people with psychopathy in many areas where they manipulate and wield their power in ways that are not necessarily violent. But then we come to the point where we have people who the only way they can feel that they're getting enough power and control is to play God. And they play God by killing people, by mass murder, by serial homicide, whether you're male or female, whether you're raping and murdering, or you're killing off your children. It's still a serial killer, and it's still psychopathy. You're not treatable. You need to be in prison. So I thought that guy's response was really good. And now I want to talk. They also I'm going to go on to these cases in just 1 minute, but I just want to point out a couple names. And here again is something funny about this DS. I can never say it. Diagnostic, statistical, whatever it is. DSMV. Another name for Munchausen syndrome is factitious disorder. I call it facetious disorder, but that's just my personal opinion of the label. The factitious disorder. Factitious disorder is what they call Munchausen syndrome. And they call it a mental illness, not a psychopathy, just a mental illness. And they also talk about something called malingering. And they say they're two different things. So, and it's really kind of funny because what they say is that a person who has Munchausen syndrome will fake things about themselves or hurt themselves to get attention because they can't help themselves. But a malingerer is just a liar, and they're just making up shit to get attention or to get money, like put up a GoFundMe type thing. And so they're psychopaths who are lying to get what they want, like mostly financially. What is the difference? I mean, if you're making up stuff and pulling the wool over people's eyes, you're a psychopath, whether you do it one way or you do it another way. I mean, really not important. And we'll see this a lot with Lacey over here, because she had a really nice Facebook page where she spent all her time talking about all her son's troubles. So a psychopath these are methodologies that a psychopath uses. They're not symptoms. They're not part of a mental illness. They're behaviors. And understand that. And so when you get to a situation where you want to feel sympathy, or you're a juror, you're going to court, the problem is we end up being sympathetic as opposed to understanding that a psychopath is manipulating you. They're playing you, and don't trust them. These are behaviors, not symptoms of a disease, mental disease. Now you can some people say, well, psychopathy is a mental illness. psychopathy is certainly a mental state. It's a state of mind where you're highly narcissistic and have zero empathy for anybody but yourself. You cannot be treated. So it's not the same thing as having, let's say, nervousness or OCD. These are different kinds of things than psychopathy. So let's not downplay psychopathy and then think, they couldn't help themselves. They could. Munchausen Syndrome and Munchausen Syndrome by proxy are extremely premeditated behaviors. They're premeditated. They don't happen accidentally. They're premeditated. And don't ever forget that. Okay, so let's go on to these three ladies. All right, now I will have to start with Marybeth Tinning because she's like the classic person we talk about. So here's a favorite from this book, which just cracked me up. This was said by a waitress she used to go to the restaurant and I guess bring her kids there and stuff. By the time Nathan died, we had forgotten how many babies she had. We really lost track. I mean, it's kind of scary that she had them, they died. She had them, they died. She had them, they died 9 times. So let's take a look at Marybeth Tinning and what happened to her. Okay, hold on a second. Let me pull my stuff up here. Okay, let me go to. Hold on. Let me go to my infamous probably Wikipedia page, and I will be doing commentary as I go through this because now we want to find out exactly what do these things mean. And for you who don't know, I want to make sure you have just a basic concept. Marybeth Tinning, she was born in 1942, and they say here, congratulations, Wikipedia is an American serial killer. In 1987, Tinning was arrested and convicted for the murder of her 9th child. So let's take a look at Marybeth Tinning. Hold on a second. Let me move over here. Okay, I just want to show Marybeth Tinning. I think that is supposed to be a picture of her. If I have the wrong picture and somebody's going to write me and say, you didn't even do your research. I believe this is a picture of Marybeth Tinning. And I had trouble finding ones that were, look colorful. But I want to show that she was once a younger woman than when we see her, when she's in prison. And these were her children, whole bunches of them. Here are all her kitties, all her dead children, very dead children. Okay, so what happened? So let's see what happened. So she was convicted of the murder of the 9th child, 4-month-old daughter Tammy Lynn on December 20th, 1985. Laboratory testing indicated her death had resulted from asphyxia by suffocation. Marybeth is suspected to be similarly involved in the previous deaths of her 8 children. And these happened over 14 years. The causes of death of the first 8 children were initially thought to be genetic. And this whole thing about genetics, and we're going to get to this in the Australian case, it's, again, because we cannot believe women would kill their children, it's easier to think that genetics, is something that the person couldn't help. I mean, here you are, you want your baby, you have a baby. Oh my God, it's a beautiful baby. And then it dies. Must be genetics. But they didn't have any particular proof of any genetics. So let me, I hope I didn't lose that spot on my book here. Oh crap. I wanted to point that out in this book because it was, I put paper towels in here because I don't have any bookmarks. Why don't I have bookmarks? But one of the points that they made, if I can find it, here it is. Okay, about why 8 children could die and not be suspected of being murdered for that long. It says here, and this is very important. Dr. Sullivan commented on this. He said he knew about Nathan, one of the children. And he said, I should have pushed harder, especially after I knew about Nathan. As I look back, the main problem is that different persons or agencies, I knew about every one of these deaths. Different persons or agencies knew about these deaths, but there was no centralized collection of information. Nobody wants to take the blame, and probably no one person or agency should. It was all of us together, the medical examiner, social services, the hospital staffs, the record keepers. All of these people knew, and all of us failed. And the reason people fail is because one thing that Munchausen syndrome and Munchausen syndrome by proxies do, they're not stupid. They go from hospital to hospital, because if you stay at one hospital and you keep going to that hospital, they kind of get wise. Let me tell you a simple story about how they change hospitals, because I think it's just really, really worthwhile knowing. Let's see if I can find it. I wrote this story once about how they're changing hospitals. Of course, I can't find it. Hold on one second. Alrighty then. It's good the way I lose things. Anyway, so basically what happened is I'm going to call her Angela. So I worked as a sign language interpreter many years ago, and actually on and off, a medical sign language interpreter. And I got a call one night. This was 20 years ago. I got a call from one hospital in the city, which is called Washington Hospital Center. And they said, please come in. It was midnight. Please come in. We have a rape victim. And I went into the hospital. I'm thinking, oh, poor thing. I go into the cubicle 10, and I go in there and I see a woman. She's standing with her back to me, and she's naked, and she's standing on a paper, because you put paper down, and that's, you have to get all your clothes off, and so the evidence falls, and I'm like, oh, and I started feeling tears come into my eyes, because you feel really bad for a rape victim, but then I said, get yourself together, because you're professional. And then she turned around. She's like, hey, Pat. I'm like, oh. Hi, Angela. How you doing? She goes, I got raped. Can you believe it? And I'm like, in sign language, I said, I was thinking, no, but okay, interesting. Maybe it happened. Okay. Really, 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 really. Oh, that's interesting. Anyway, she got the exam done. She's asked me how my children are doing. How are your kids? Did boys play baseball? Are there any sandwiches? I'm really hungry. I want a sandwich. And she got a sandwich, and she was all smiles until the doctor came into the room, and then she said, and I'm thinking, I hate to be suspicious, but I'm not really buying it. Anyway, I went home about 7 o'clock in the morning, and then I had to go do my regular day jobs. I hadn't had any sleep. And the next night, I'm thinking, oh, good. Don't call me. I need a good night's sleep. But somewhere around midnight, just as I've fallen asleep, I get a call. Pat, please go to DC General, which is another hospital in the city. DC General, there's a rape victim down there. And I'm like, okay. So I jump in the car, I drive there. And as I'm walking in, I start muttering to myself, I bet it's Angela. I go into the room, and guess what? It's Angela. And I'm like, got raped again? And she goes, yeah, can you believe it? I'm like, no. And then she's got some crackers and some juice, and she went home. Now, she went to 2 different hospitals. That's a game that's played by Munchausen Syndrome and Munchausen Syndrome by proxy. You move around hospitals, they don't communicate with each other. So you go to one hospital and say your child is having problems breathing, they deal with it. Then you go to another hospital, and it's a whole new situation in the emergency room. They don't know that you said that 3 days ago at a different hospital. So this is a game that is played, which is one of the reasons nobody recognizes it, because there isn't a good communication system. And as I pointed out, most people have no idea what kind of offenders women are as far as hurting and killing their children, that they're psychopaths. You meet them for the first time, and they're good actresses, and you feel sorry for them, and you're like, oh my God. And then you try to help the child, even if she's lying about every symptom in the book. And then the poor child goes through tests and all kinds of things. Or maybe she's made the child sick one way or the other. And then you're like, I don't know what's wrong with this child. So you try to help that child. So Marybeth Tinning. So 9 Tinning children died under Marybeth's care over 14 years. So let's go on. So she was finally convicted of second-degree murder in 1987. Second-degree murder. Now, if a man went out and raped and murdered a woman, he wouldn't get second degree. But somehow when you smother your child with a pillow, you don't get first degree. I think that's ridiculous. It's a premeditated homicide. It's premeditated. It's not like you went and robbed a store and you didn't intend to kill anybody, but the guy pulled the gun on you, the owner, and you shot him because you freaked. That might be not first degree. But sexual homicide and killing your own children purposely, first degree. But nope, she didn't get that. Anyway, she was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced 20 years to life. And then she she appealed it, and then that didn't work. And then Tinning's diagnosis of Munchausen syndrome by proxy has come into question. You know why it should come into question in general? Just because it's bullshit anyway. It's not really, it's just a fancy label for a psychopathic behavior. But it says it is unclear if she has ever been diagnosed with Munchausen syndrome by proxy. Analyzing her recurring events, some believes her pattern of behaviors aligns perfectly with the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition. So anyway, she was incarcerated and she was denied parole 6 times, but was granted parole on her 7th hearing. In July 2018, that was 2018, she was released in August 21st of 2018. If Ted Bundy were let out of prison after killing all those women, would you be okay with that? Probably not. But Marybeth Tinning kills all those babies and she just can walk out of prison. And here's an interesting thing about killing babies and killing children in general. We are much harsher on adults getting killed than we are babies getting killed. Somehow the babies, since they haven't developed a life, since they haven't developed a personality, they're sort of like a little thing, you know, that little, just a little mushy little thing. We give much lesser sentences for killing children than we do killing adults. So you can kill 8 children. You're a serial killer. And, you know, it's just, you know, the baby's died, you know, so, okay, let her out, which I think is quite scary. Now, the question comes down to, did she actually kill all these children? And she had a kind of messed up childhood, but messed up childhood does not make you a killer. It doesn't help. Sometimes it does encourage you to become psychopathic. That it does. Psychopaths are usually developed by 5 years old. 5 years old. I think psychopathy is kind of in your brain. Then you develop how you want to use your psychopathy. So I'm going to say she was probably psychopathic early on. Now, then in 1963, she met Joseph Tinning on a blind date. Joseph was quietly happy-go-lucky. And I always point out that the real word for that is dolt, D-O-L-T. That means your wife can pretty much do anything and you're kind of an idiot and you kind of, oh, you brought me dinner? Okay, we're going to have sex? Cool, okay, I'm good. And they're kind of like out to lunch, just out to lunch. They're not bad people, they're just out to lunch. So anyway, so sometime where the marriage is supposedly in heavy turmoil, she poisons him. She placed barbiturate pills, which she took from her friend from an epileptic daughter. She put him into his grape juice. And then he ended up in the hospital. She tried to kill him, but he refused to press charges and he continued to be married to her. Dolt. Dude, you're a dolt. Pretty bad. And one of the reasons that there were suspicions got bigger was they thought this was genetic. See this young little baby here? That's not her biological child. There's no way genetics came through. So she adopted this little boy. I don't know how the hell any adoption agency gave her this cute little baby when all her babies were dying. I mean, what kind of social agency is this? And she adopts him, but then she has this child right after, but both of them are dead. But the doctors are like, wait a minute on that genetics thing. Probably not. So anyway, so eventually when she finally got suspicious on the 9th one, and she got convicted. And again, she's even still considered not that bad because she's not, she's a kind of, a serial killer, but it's just babies and she's a woman and she probably has a mental disorder. So let her out of prison. She should have gotten the death penalty, but she didn't. All right. So that's her. Here she is now. She's coming out of prison. So, and I say we wouldn't tolerate that with a male serial killer, but female serial killers, we're very lenient. All right, so let's move on to the next one, which is a really interesting case. Let me see. Okay, so this is, let me get all my notes. I wish I had a teleprompter. That would be so nice, but I don't have a teleprompter. So I have to try to wing it, Okay, so we have Lacey Spears. Let me go to Lacey. So you know who Lacey Spears is. For you who do not know who Lacey Spears is. Oh, great. Now she's missing in action here. Okay. Lacey, what the devil is it? Oh, I had a better one. That's why I have so many pieces of information. Sometimes I get lose control of where they all are, because I'm doing 3 people today. And, if you do one case, it's a lot easier. But when you do 3 people, it really screws you up. So I want to point out about Lacey Spears. Hold on a second. There it is. Okay. Lacey Spears. Now, she only killed one child. His name is Garnett. And here's what I was talking about, how you change hospitals. It says here, she kept telling medical staff the boy wouldn't eat. Oh, let me show you a picture. Oh, so let me show you the picture when he's a little creature. Okay, so here he is, a cute little baby. So he's a little baby. And here he is. I put this picture up because this is when he looks happy and he's adoring his mother. A lot of pictures show him and I'm like, it is not the way it probably was. So look at him. It's his mommy. Okay. She kept telling medical staff that the boy wouldn't eat and asked them to surgically implant a feeding tube that would allow her to feed him without having to swallow, she said. Now, it is not normal for women to want to put feeding tubes into their babies' tummies. And she's saying he's a failure to thrive. Now, by the way, failure to thrive is a really creepy thing too. And very hard to prove why they have failure to thrive. For example, some women are breastfeeding and the claim is the baby didn't nurse enough or there's not enough milk. And so the baby starts failing to thrive. How do you know the mother actually fed the baby? How do you know she just didn't feed the baby? And then she says, I just didn't have breast milk. It's hard to prove because I'm sure there are legitimately women out there who were trying to breastfeed and for whatever reasons, they weren't getting enough milk and they had trouble or the kid wouldn't take a bottle. There's reasons that the child may be having issues, but you also don't know if they're just lying like dogs. So she says he's failure to thrive. Is that because she didn't care to feed him? And then she's claiming, oh, he's losing weight, he won't eat. Because there's nobody there to prove that. And that's where the doctors run into problems. So mommy comes in and says, oh, my baby won't eat. And they're like, oh my God, And so she says, please put a feeding tube in him because he's like, he won't have to swallow. He's having trouble. He has this acid thing going on, which I think never has been explained. Anyway, this hospital declined. They refused to do the feeding tube, saying he ate well under their care and was able to keep food down. Okay, this is called evidence. And this is a very important thing, which I think the hospitals need to do more of with understanding these offenders. When a mother claims that her child is not thriving in her care, that child may need to be removed from her care for a small period of time, keep her away from him, and have all the caregivers at the hospital, whatever, caring for him to prove whether he's really failing to thrive on his own. And that's what happened. Once she brought him to the hospital, lo and behold, the kid was eating like a little champ. So they were suspicious. Unfortunately, they weren't suspicious enough. So anyway, they said, hey, look, the kid's fine. So what did Lacey do? She took Garnett to another hospital where she convinced them to put the tube in him. I call this medical malpractice. And that woman I talked to you about, the Angela who came in for the rapes, did the same thing to her children. She would come in, and when she got pregnant, she would come back to the hospital and claim she was having cramping and she was bleeding and she needed a C-section at 6 months. And one doctor would refuse to give her the C-section, but then the shift would change. And the next doctor said, okay, and gave her a C-section. And that child was born deaf, blind, and mentally disabled and died a year later in the hospital for sick children. She got her wish because the shift changed. Now, what good reason did the second doctor have to do this? But was he ever prosecuted? No. And she went on to get pregnant again and again and again. And she is Munchausen Syndrome and Munchausen Syndrome by proxy. Very dangerous person. She's a psychopath and a half. And so is Lacey. So she went to another hospital and got whatever doctor who shouldn't have done it to put a feeding tube in him. Then this poor child ended up on a feeding tube for most of his life. From that point on, he had a feeding tube. Now, there were lots of red flags. For example, this woman said, I'm a nurse and I've been around Garnett. I didn't think the feeding tube was necessary because when he was with me, he ate formula or baby food or food. He didn't have a problem with throwing up. So why the hell was the kid still on this feeding tube? If the nurses can prove he can eat, then the feeding tube should be removed. And if he keeps coming back with failure to thrive, then they need to stop the parent from having contact with that child because there's something fishy going on. Several of the emergency room visits went beyond feeding issues. And he was getting ear infections a lot, bad, terrible ear infections. I was suspicious about that. I didn't understand how he's getting all of these things. So let me see, what else do they say about her? She also chronicled all her child's issues on her Facebook page. And get this. This is again something that really bugs me. When the judge sentenced her last April 20 years to life in prison, he gave some leniency, convinced she suffered from Munchausen Syndrome by proxy, a rare mental disorder, which isn't, by the way, there's a lot of women psychopaths and a lot more female serial killers killing their children than we know. It's not as rare as people think because these cases aren't being recognized or prosecuted. So he lowered her sentence because of that. Now the question would be, was there any proof she was actually doing anything to him? What the hell was wrong with this kid? What was wrong with him? All right, he made it to this age. About, what did he make it to, 5 years old? So here, let's read this. The assistant district attorney said, Lacey Spears is not an innocent mother grieving the death of her son. Lacey Spears is a calculating child killer who researched, planned, and executed the intentional poisoning of her son. He was poisoned by excessive salt. She was because of that feeding tube, she was able to enter salt into the feeding bag and give him extreme amounts of salt. Now, when he finally went to the hospital, the last time he went to the hospital, she was, there's a video of this, and it's absolutely a very horrifying video. I'm not going to play it because I don't play horrifying things here. You can find it on YouTube if you want to, so do so. Anyway, here he is. See, there he is in bed. You see mommy over here on her cell phone? She looks like she's just hanging out with her son. No, she was actually Googling how to poison children, salt poisoning. She was Googling salt poisoning while she was in there. Like, how much do you need? And then the staff came in and they said, he is okay. He's ready to go home. They left the room. She took that child. See her picking, oops, wait a minute. Yeah, she's picking him up. She's carrying her child off. See, that's his little leg there. She's carrying her child to the bathroom. She brings him back from the bathroom. And all of a sudden, he starts throwing up or trying to throw up because he can't throw up. So he's like, and he's like in terrible pain. He's all over the place. He's down there like that. He's in agony because suddenly he's coding. And here he is. He's coding now. Right after that happened, right after she went to the bathroom and brought him back, she's coding. He's coding. And they see that they think there was something in her hand that she used to do something in the bathroom. And he coded right after that. Then she calls home. She calls a friend and says, hey, go to my house and get rid of the feeding bags. Throw them away, not in the house. Throw them away someplace else and don't tell anybody about it. Guilty as hell. I mean, this woman is guilty as hell. She salt poisoned her child for 5 years and did many other things to him. If she had another child, I'm sure she would have done the same to that child as well. She got a tremendous amount of attention through going on Facebook with her little site. But even then, the problem is they try to say she's just quote Munchausen's, and she's not really a serial killer. Well, she's not a serial killer at this point, but she's a child killer. And it has nothing to do with some kind of like she couldn't help herself. No, she purposely tortured her child. So in other words, if you torture a woman by raping and sadistically torturing them, you're a bad person. You sadistically torture your child, you just have mental problems. You kill a woman after you torture her, you're a serial killer. You torture and kill your child, you just have woman has problems. I think we got to get rid of Munchausen Syndrome and Munchausen Syndrome by proxy need to disappear. If we can understand those are labels for behaviors. They're not causes. They're labels of behaviors of a psychopath. They're still psychopaths. It's just a behavior that this is the way they express themselves. That's all it is. So I disagree entirely with all that crap about, that they have a mental disorder, that you can send them to a mental institution and you can fix it. You can't fix it. You cannot fix it. All right. So now let's go back to the big case of the day and why I did this at night so Australia could be here. So now let's take a look at Kathleen Folbigg. And this is a very, very interesting case. Let me see if I can pull up. It's going to take me a bit here. Hold on a second. I just want to be able to give you the basics on Kathleen Folbigg. All right. She was born in 1967. She's an Australian who was convicted of murdering her 3 infant children. Patrick Allen at age 8 months, Sarah Kathleen at 10 months, and Laura Elizabeth at 19 months. She was also convicted of manslaughter of her 4th child, Caleb Gibson, at age 19 days. The deaths took place between 1989 and 1999. Her own husband contacted the police after discovering her personal diary. She's presently in prison, sentenced to 30 years, 25 years with no parole. Okay. She maintains her innocence, claiming her 4 children died from natural causes. Now, let's see what happened here. I just want to kind of get you. So here she is. That's when she's getting married to her husband. And here's her husband. There they are with one of the children. And these are the children that died. Now, it's interesting. I believe in the case of Tinning, the first child, I believe, a child was sick and died. And what that can do sometimes is inspire you, if you're a psychopath, to say, oh, damn, everybody started saying, oh, you poor dear, oh, you poor thing. And they cared about me. When he was alive, he was just a pain in the butt. But when he died, I got so much great attention. And this is actually the way that the psychopathic female who has children they kill think. They're like, okay, you get pregnant. When you're pregnant, everybody goes, oh my God, you're pregnant. It's all about you. And then you get bigger and bigger, and everybody's like feeling it. Oh, look at you, look at you. Then you get a maybe a shower of some sort, and people come over. Then you go to the hospital, and everybody's like, ah, and then you get the baby, and then you got to take care of the stupid thing, You're supposed to nurse that thing 24 hours a day, because that is really, really sometimes painful, and it's a pain in the butt. You never get to sleep. And then the thing cries, and then husband goes back to work and leaves you alone with a critter, And after a while, people stop caring about you, and they only say, how's the baby? Thanks a lot. You don't ask how I'm doing anymore. Now it's all about the baby. And now that baby becomes a burden. And you say to yourself, when my other baby died, matter of fact, remember Angela I was telling you about? When that baby died, that she got pulled out of her early, died. You know what she did the next time she was pregnant? She would go into the doctor and she would say, they'd say, how far along are you? And she'd go, well, I think I'm 3 months, because it's about so many months after my baby died. She used her baby died in almost every visit to the doctor. And then my baby died. And they go, oh my God. And she used that. You wouldn't believe. So when you have one baby die, you're like, this is really cool stuff. And so now that you've done the pregnancy and the hoo-hoo, the baby's here, and now you got to take care of the stupid thing. At some point you might go, if I could get rid of the baby, first of all, the work is gone. When people ask, why do men kill their pregnant fiancés? Well, maybe because if they get rid of her, they don't have child support and have to deal with a woman and that baby for the next 20 years of their life or forever. So, same thing. Your baby gets on your nerves and you don't love it anyway. It's a thing. And maybe it was kind of cute. Maybe once in a while you thought it was funny, but it's in your way. And as psychopaths go, you're either useful or in the way. You're useful when you get attention, and you're not useful when you're a pain in the butt. So now I kill you, and everybody, I get to go to the doctor. Everybody goes, ah, and then you get all that attention, and then you can start over and get pregnant again. And what a deal, So you create your own victims. I mean, serial killers have to go out and look for them. The females can just create them right at home, and kill them off one after the other and get the thrills they want. So they are very premeditated people. So anyway, with Kathleen Folbigg, She was the first child. Now, let me just go through the kids really quick. Caleb Gibson was born in 1989. In February, he was known to breathe noisily and was diagnosed by a pediatrician to be suffering from a mild case of something with the larynx. I can't pronounce it. Something he would eventually outgrow. He was otherwise born healthy. Then he was put to sleep in a room adjoining the bedroom she shared with her husband. During the night, Caleb stirred from midnight till 2, and then she was found, and it was attributed to cot death. Then she had Patrick. He was born in 1990, and the husband actually stayed home and helped his wife and care for the baby for 3 months. And then Folbigg put Patrick to bed, and then Craig was awakened by the sounds of his wife screaming and found her standing at the baby's cot. He noticed the child wasn't breathing, attempted to revive him, but with resuscitation, CPR. Ambulance was called. He'd go to the hospital. He would later be diagnosed with suffering from epilepsy and cortical blindness. I'm not sure what that was caused by, though apparently life-threatening event would go unexplained. He died 4 months later due to seizures. Well, if you cause damage to a child, you can permanently cause them brain damage from lack of oxygen, and they can in the future have seizures and fail. That was the one I believe she got. She called on February 18th, 1991. She telephoned her husband at work to report Patrick's death, saying it happened again. I think that was the one she did not get a homicide charge on, or she got second on that one. Then Sarah came along. Following their second loss, the couple moved to South Wales. She was born on 14th of October, 1992. And then they had Laura. Wait a minute, what happened to, wait a minute, they all died, so I'm not sure why they didn't talk about the death there. So anyway, now, basically, she was always with, either went in to find the child dead or was with them. The husband never found them dead. He didn't go in and was with them when they died. It was always Kathleen. And then they became suspicious because 4 children had died in her care. And she got convicted. Now, the question is why she was convicted and why is she getting an appeal now, or people are appealing for an appeal. In 2017, I believe it was, she got one of the appeals, and it was attempted to say their husband actually killed the children, but that didn't go over well. And now there is the issue of maybe it was genetic. And I'm going to talk about the genetics, and I'm going to talk about why there's a problem with that because of the diary that she wrote. And there's an interesting concept about the diary. So let me pull all of this stuff up. It's going to be the genetics versus the diary. Okay. And this is, it's a difficult thing for anybody who is a jury, an appeals court, the public, anybody, because again, the children, when you smother a child, it rarely leaves any kind of proof. But the statistics are, it's very extremely unlikely that 4 of your babies will all die without any signs of whatever they died of, except they could have all been smothered. So statistically, it's extraordinarily unlikely that anybody would lose 4 children. It's extraordinary. SIDS, what they call sudden infant death syndrome. Again, they call it a syndrome because there's no proof that it doesn't mean anything. It just means your kid's dead. I mean, the baby died. The baby died, stopped breathing. We don't know why. There are probably a lot more homicides with SIDS than people realize, but SIDS is what's used because, again, since it's hard to prove, you don't want to accuse a parent of killing their child. I mean, it's like the most horrific thing. I can't even imagine myself. I remember my first baby. And I nursed her and I slept. I kept her in bed with me. And some people disagree with that. They say you can roll over on the child, although usually that only happens when you're drunk, or you roll over on the child. Oh, I didn't mean to do it, but you get rid of your kid and you don't get a homicide charge. You get an accidental death, accidental smothering, supposedly. But, if I'm nursing my baby and for whatever reasons, I didn't roll over on her, but I just looked over and she's dead. And to think I've lost my child that I love so much, and then I'm going to be taken to court and accused of homicide and put away for the rest of my life. I mean, That's a horrible thing. And it's a horrible thing to accuse somebody of. So oftentimes when you have a one-time SIDS thing, which nobody quite can explain how the child died, usually the person is not accused. Unless you're Lacey, in which case you're poisoning your child. The child is the behavior of the mother, where she's always going to the hospital with all these demands and complaints about the child that are never proven at the hospital, but only happen at home. That's a proof. That's an indication of psychopathy that should be recognized. But usually there is a history before the children die. There's a history of something wrong with mommy, some kind of attachment disorder. In other words, they don't have any feelings for the children. They have behaviors toward the children which are very negative. They're crappy mothers. I mean, they're just not good at what they do, or they say so many things that you have to question that there's not something wrong here. So one child dying, it might be hard. You might go back and look and see that person did have indeed a bunch of weird behaviors before that child died. And that might be your indication. But again, one child, could happen. Get up to 4, gets really difficult. So what happened is the 4 were questionable, but it wasn't until her husband found her diaries and he went, holy crap, because until then he was probably a dolt, a dolt who didn't see what was going on around him. Now, she didn't poison him like Marybeth Tinning poisoned her husband, but he didn't want to accuse his own wife of doing terrible things. Now, he might have noticed she had creepy behaviors about the children sometimes, things that she was doing that made him uncomfortable. But then again, maybe he was just not paying attention a lot of times, because I call these husbands dolts because I say if they get sex and they get food and they can go to work, a lot of times they don't pay much attention to what's happening in the home. And they accept whatever their wife says. That they're easy marks. And until he found her diary, I guess he kept it his maybe not. And then he found her diary and said, oh crap, turn it over to the police, which I find an interesting thing in itself, that usually these kind of husbands don't turn things into the police. They still like Marybeth Tinning's husband. I think he's still waiting. I think he was there when she got out. I mean, it's like, okay, so she poisoned you and she killed 8 of your children, but it's okay. That is kind of the way some of these men are. The fact that he lost 4 of his children and stopped supporting his wife is interesting to me. And when he found this diary, it was obviously, I don't think it was a diary alone. I'm going to say all of his experiences probably started clicking in his head going, I've had suspicions for year after year after year, but I just couldn't believe it. But now that I've got this diary, I do believe it. And he turned it in. That's what got her convicted. Now, let's go to the diary first, and then I'll go to the genetic issues and say, was a diary just an unfair usage of subjective, people being subjective about what they thought the diary meant and convicting her on really no evidence? So let's go look at what her diary had to say. So 6 of her diaries were taken for the period in which the children died. She says, here's some of the things she said. She claimed that, first of all, the diaries, she said, I didn't kill my children, and these diaries are a record of just how depressed and how much trouble I was having and all the issues that go with it. Well, yes, you can write a diary that says you're depressed and you have issues, but the problem is a lot of the reasons psychopaths kill their children is because they do have issues, and they're depressed being around those children because the children are getting in their way. So let's see what she said. All right. She treated the diaries as if she was writing to a close friend and signed them off as Kathy. In November 1997, she wrote, with Sarah, all I wanted her was to shut up. And one day she did. Okay. So again, you could say, well, the child cried a lot and she wanted her to shut up. And man, then one day she just died. And man, it did happen. She shut up. But, to write that you wanted your child to shut up like that is not a loving thing. Somebody who is frustrated and depressed might say, I'm struggling with my child crying. I love her so much. I can't stand to hear her crying, but, I'm always alone and I don't know how to handle it. And I just, I don't like to hear my child crying. But that's not quite what she said. Okay, the following month, she said, Laura's a fairly good-natured baby. Thank goodness. It saved her from the fate of her siblings. Let me read that again. With Laura's fairly good-natured baby. In other words, she didn't cry. She was pretty much a laid back, just hang around kid that didn't torture her very much. Thank goodness it has saved her from the fate of her siblings. Now, if the children died a natural death, how would her disposition save her from death? That is what people would call a confession. That the reason she didn't die and the reason she didn't have the fate of her siblings was because she didn't piss me off as much as the other siblings did. And so the fate of what happened to them didn't happen to her because I didn't need to do anything. That is called a confession. Now, she wrote some more stuff. Let's see. Let me see what else she wrote. Let me find all the rest of them. Okay. There was a whole bunch of them. She also says she made a diary entry about doing terrible things to her children. She did terrible things due to stress. Remember they say that they got called stressors that made you do these things? Terrible things due to stress. Did not mean she killed her first 3 babies. What terrible things are we talking about here? She claims it's a broad spectrum of things that I'm using the word terrible for. It could be me placing my child down to let her cry for even 30 seconds. That's a terrible thing in my view. Oh, come on now. Really? Every parent has laid their kid down and the kids cry for 30 seconds, and they're not claiming that was a terrible thing to do. A terrible thing to do would be to completely neglect your child or to abuse their child, not because you ignore the child for 30 seconds. I mean, that's absolutely ridiculous, quite frankly. Let's see what else she had. Oh, there was a whole bunch of, I'm trying to find the rest of her. Okay, I got some more of these. Okay, I knew there were more. And that's why there's enough of these entries in the diaries to make you go, there's concerns here. Okay, June 3, 1990. This was the day that Patrick Allen David Folbigg was born. I had mixed feelings this day, whether or not I was going to cope as a mother or whether I was going to get stressed out like I did last time. I often regret Caleb and Patrick only because your life changes so much. And maybe I'm not a person that likes change, but we'll see. Wait a minute. She only regrets having those 2 children because they changed her life, not because she killed them, not because they died, but because they changed her life. No, if you lose your children to death, usually the whole thing is, I'm afraid to have another child because I can't stand losing another child like that. I'm so stressed out because I'm afraid this child will die the way my last children died. But no, she's worried about her life changing, that the other 2 changed her life too much. June 18th, 1996, I'm ready for this. I'm ready this time, and I'll have help and support this time. When I think I'm going to lose control like last times, I'll just hand the baby over to someone else. How is she losing control? And what is she doing when she loses control? So when you lose control, it usually means you're doing some damage to the child. It's not that you're leaving it to scream for 30 seconds. It usually means that you're shaking the child, you're throwing the child, you're hitting the child, you're smothering the child with a pillow. And therefore, you can't afford to lose control because when you do, terrible things happen. She's admitting she lost control to the point where the child was obviously endangered in the past. And now she says, I should hand the baby over to somebody. Okay. Now she says, obviously I'm my father's daughter, but I think losing my temper stage and being frustrated with everything has passed. Okay. Then she says in December 4th, 1996, I'm ready this time, but I've already decided if I get any feelings of jealousy. Interesting. Jealousy or anger too much, I will leave Craig and the baby rather than answer being as before. I'm not sure what that quite means. That will be when I ask for help and sleep whenever I can to keep myself in a decent mood. I know that battling wills and sleep deprivation were the causes last time. The causes of what? If you put your child down in the crib, if you fed your child, put your child down and your child went to sleep, how the heck is your battling wills? Battling wills with who? Battling wills with a baby? You're having a fight with the baby doesn't want to go to sleep and you want it to go to sleep. You're battling wills. And sleep deprivation. Sleep deprivation doesn't cause your child to die from SIDS in the night. It doesn't. And neither do battling wills cause your child to die of SIDS in the night. What sleep deprivation, if you're going to use that as an excuse, and battling wills, if you're going to use that as an excuse, cause is that you did something to your child under those circumstances. And she says they were causes, not one cause, causes. She's killed more than once. January 1st, 1997, but I feel confident about it all going well this time. I'm going to call for help and not attempt to do everything myself. That's reasonable, okay. I know that the main reason for all my stress and before and the stress made me do terrible things. August 25th, scary feelings. I've realized I actually love her. This is the last, I think this is the last child. I actually love her and have bonded with her. I'm going to tell you that that's not true. What's happened is she's had a discussion with a person, a medical person who has said, we will hope that you bond with this child. And one of the examples again is Angela. Angela, my deaf client, when she had a baby that she hadn't killed yet, she would sit outside the doctor's office and she would ask me, what should I be doing with my 2-year-old? And I said to her, well, you should be doing puzzles, reading, playing games with her. Oh, okay. She'd go into the doctor would say, well, how are things going? And she'd go, oh, they're going really well because I read to her, I play games with her, and do puzzles. And I'm like, didn't I just say that outside? Because in her own head, she's not going to do those things. She doesn't care about the child enough to do those things, but she can learn from another person what to say. I'm going to say she learned from somebody here that she should actually love her, that she should not, I realize I actually love her. No, that somebody told you should actually love her and bond with her and wish to protect her. That sounds all phony to me, totally. That somebody told us that she should have a desire to protect her. Maternal instinct is what they call it now, because see, she's now learning a term for what she's supposed to have. I now know I never had it with the others. Okay, she's just admitted she's never had a maternal instinct with the other 3, which means she didn't bond with them, she didn't love them, she didn't care for them. And they gave her a monitor. A monitor is a good idea. Nothing can happen without the monitor knowing. And since I'm not game enough not to plug it in because they want to know why I hadn't, everything will be fine this time. So she's claiming that the monitor is going to keep her from killing it. Oh, is that what she's trying to keep her from doing? Wait a minute. If you have a monitor, if the child dies of a crib death, you shouldn't even be worried about the monitor. So they're saying nothing can happen with the monitor. Well, the monitor is not going to stop crib death. A monitor watching you will stop you from killing that child in front of it. Again, another admission. October 25th, 1997. Sarah was boyish looking. Laura has definite feminine features. They are chalk and cheese, and truthfully just as well. Wouldn't have handled another one like Sarah. She saved her life from being different. So she's saying Sarah died because she was kind of like not too good looking. But Laura is saving her life because she's good looking. Now, I'm sorry, but does crib death differentiate between good looking babies and kind of not so good looking babies? Or is mommy saying because a child is cute enough, I feel something for her. Maybe it's just she's cuter so I can parade her around better than the other one. And the other one just was kind of an ugly little runt, so I killed it. So she saved her life by being different. November 3rd, 1997. Lost it with her earlier. Oh, well, things aren't going so well now. Left her crying in our bedroom and had to walk out. That feeling was happening. And I think it was because I had to clear my head and prioritize. Okay. As I've done here now, I love her. I really do. I don't want anything to happen. Well, what would happen to her if you don't love her? Couldn't be crib death. It could be violent death. December 31st, 1997, getting Laura to be next year ought to be fun. She'll realize a party is going up. I guess she's talking about her birthday. And that will be it. Wonder if the battle of the wills will start with her. And I then. So she has a problem. And this is true for a lot of people who have psychopaths with kids. As they get older, they start demanding more. I don't want to do that. Give me that. That's mine. That's a battle of the wills. And now she's worried that battles of the wills will cause a problem. What problem? Not crib death. It's going to cause violent death. We'll actually get to see. She's a fairly good-natured baby. Thank goodness. It has saved her from the fate of her siblings. Again, she's saying her good nature is keeping her. Crib death does not choose children because they're good-natured or not good-natured. So she's saying because she's good-natured, she's not going to have the fate of her siblings. That only can mean to me that something happened violent to her siblings, and because she's not such a pain in the butt, she might live longer. I think she was warned. Okay, by whom? January 28th, 1998. I feel like the worst mother on earth, scared that she will leave me now. Leave you now by crib death again. Okay, so you're not a good mother, so she's going to die by genetic issues? No. She's going to leave me now like Sarah did. Well, Sarah did leave, but maybe because you helped her leave. I knew I was short-tempered and cruel sometimes to her, and she left with a bit of help. She did. She left the earth with a bit of help. It wasn't crib death that would help her leave the earth due to mommy being short-tempered. I don't want that to ever happen again. I actually seem to have a bond with Laura. It can't happen again. I'm ashamed of myself. Well, it did happen again. So I guess the cuteness and good-naturedness didn't really help her not do something to the child. Or crib death, just for whatever reasons, took her because she was good-natured and good-looking. All right. That is why she was convicted. Because in the entire diary, she basically is confessing to the murders of her children. And what they're trying to say over and over again is, oh no, it's not that. She was just feeling depressed, and so she wanted to express herself. Well, you know, if you're depressed over the death of your children, there's ways to express yourself that don't include insinuating that you murdered them all. So I don't buy that for a minute. I mean, you can lose your children and be very, very sad. And if it's crib death, it's crib death. And if it's something genetic and you don't know what happened, you're not, you could blame yourself for, I should have maybe gotten them genetic testing. Maybe I shouldn't have left them in another room. That's something somebody might say about crib death. Maybe I should have kept the child closer to me so that I could hear if they stopped breathing. Maybe I should have used, got more medical help with a child. You would think you made all these mistakes in not being able to determine what was causing the crib death. But that's not what she's saying. She's saying basically that all the children died because of their bad natures and her bad nature. So has nothing to do with crib death. That has everything to do with violent death. All right, so now let's get to the most recent thing about the appeal. So here it is. All right. The claim is that there is an abnormality, a genetic abnormality. This is very difficult to understand because it's scientific, but I'm going to point out the fallacy in this because I'm having a real hard time with a supposed claim. All right, let me see if I can find. Okay, here's a new DNA. This is an interesting statement. As damning as the circumstantial evidence appears, yes, it is extraordinarily damning. Kathleen Folbigg has always protested her innocence. Now science may support her claims. Scientists recently discovered a genetic mutation in Kathleen Folbigg. Now, mind you, this genetic mutation did not cause any outward signs of her having any issues, any physical health issues from this genetic mutation in herself. And also it's in her two daughters. They were called COM2 and G114R, which could, now pay attention to, I'm going to read a number of different articles and look at the wording, could have led to both girls' deaths. These mutations are extremely rare, but when present can cause heart problems in babies and young children, making them highly susceptible to SIDS. A SIDS, again, is not it proves nothing. It just means a child died. So it's highly susceptible to what? Moreover, both girls' deaths were precipitated by infections that may have exacerbated an already existing issue. Now, again, may have, could have, whatever. And I'm going to get to the scientific data behind this as best I can because there's not much of it. The two boys, Caleb and Patrick, also had a rare genetic mutation called BSN or Bassoon genes. Less is known about the potential impact of these mutations. Guess what? So much less is known about these mutations that there's no evidence in scientific literature of children dying from these genetic mutations. So there's no evidence of that. And research is ongoing because there's no evidence of that. But so far, what is known about the BSN genes is that when this gene is defective in mice, they can die during epileptic fits. Remember that Patrick suffered from seizures prior to his death. Well, something happened to him which may have been partial suffocation or whatever that caused brain damage, brought him to the hospital. And then, yes, later on, they had a seizure. The seizure is not proven to be caused by bassoon genes. And even if it was caused in mice, it doesn't mean it's caused in humans the same way. And only one of the children had the seizure thing. So essentially you're saying some mice experiment that doesn't correlate to humans was the cause of what happened to him, and also his brother, which it didn't happen to. So you see, so already those two don't even make any sense. Now, the COM2 thing is a little bit better for the girls, but here's some interesting stuff about that. Let's see if I can find it. All the children, by the way, died between 19 days and 19 months. Now, the COM thing, let me find where it is here. Okay. What happened with that particular finding is that two children, this is the only evidence I can find, that two kids died who had this supposed gene, but they were older children. I think they were 4 and 6 years old, and there had been physical exertion and problems prior to that. In other words, they already were known to have some issues, and then they did exertion and they died at 4 and 6 years old. There is nothing in the scientific literature, nothing that shows anybody who has this gene that there's like a 90% death rate in infants. There's nothing like that. They're extrapolating from the most very, very limited literature, scientific literature, that maybe this could be, it's possible. Well, okay, you can say all that you want to. Now they say here, this is the kind of stuff that happens, and it does happen when the defense team is looking to defend the client. They will find people to say these things, and they will be convincing to some people. Now, here's what it says. Among the petition signatories is Professor George Fink from the Florey Institute, who said this week that he strongly supports the petition to pardon and release Folbigg. There is absolutely no forensic evidence that she murdered her 4 children. This is true. There is not forensic evidence. There is massive circumstantial evidence. He says this, there is robust evidence that the death of her children was due to one or more genetic mutations. There is no robust evidence. The scientific data is so minimal, is so unresearched, is so not there. And yet he calls that robust. That's unbelievable to me. Another signatory, child and public health researcher, Professor Fiona Stanley, says, it is deeply concerning that medical and scientific evidence has been ignored. No, it hasn't, because there isn't really any true scientific evidence as of yet, in preference of circumstantial evidence. Yeah, that's because your scientific evidence is here and your circumstantial evidence is massive. We now have an alternative explanation for the death of the Folbigg children. It's not an alternative explanation because there's no evidence to support the explanation. You can always claim there's some alternative concept. Aliens might have killed the children. I mean, invisible aliens might have come down and killed those children. There's just as much evidence of that than the supposed non-existent scientific evidence, which is so minimal you cannot call it robust and you cannot call it an alternative explanation. It's not. It's just not. And then you have to take this tiny little information and try to make that more important than the massive amount of information we have from her behaviors. The fact that 4 children died in her care when she was only there, that it's like astronomical that a woman would lose 4 children as babies without her being involved. The 4 children, they had different anomalies, supposedly. These 2 died of this, these 2 died of that, and this one didn't even have what that one had. And yet, amazingly enough, they all died. I mean, this is ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. I don't object to scientific evidence, getting somebody to prove that somebody did not do something. But there is no robust explanation coming from the scientific community. I don't know I'm appalled that scientists would sign on to say that this was robust and this was a proper explanation. Because one of the things about science is that you're not supposed to say something is true scientifically until it's gone through a great deal of testing and it takes a long time to prove something. You're supposed to go through a scientific method, and you're supposed to have a lot of argument back and forth and have to prove things to the point where you do not have any question anymore. It truly is proven. There's nothing here. There's absolutely nothing here except an argument for the defense. And I don't know why the scientists have signed on to that, but it appalls me because I don't think they should have. So I find that very disturbing. And if you've got 70 scientists who will sign on to saying something that isn't even scientific, can you blame the jurors? If it gets to an appeal, the jurors are going to go, 70 scientists said this is maybe the reason they died. And of course, she will walk free because the jurors, they can't fight against 70 scientists, even though they don't understand what the scientists have really said, which is not much. But it doesn't matter because they've all agreed that this is the way the children could have died. So anyway, that is my final explanation for these particular cases. And I will now look at some of your questions, and I know things behind the scenes. I can actually not see all your comments as I'm doing the show. So then we have people saying really nasty things that what I'm peddling as an expert is disturbing. Oh yeah, we blocked that user right there. Okay, you can go in. You may disagree with me, absolutely. But I think I presented a perfectly reasonable case where I believe that Kathleen Folbigg is guilty of the crimes that she has been convicted of. I do not believe the scientific evidence is substantial. I think that the circumstantial evidence is overwhelming, and I'm going to stand by my conclusion. Now, if you have a different conclusion, you're entitled to that as a human being. I won't come after you and attack you. And I would appreciate that you not do the same to me, just because you find you don't agree with me. You're welcome to go someplace else and make your commentary. But I'm not going to. Emily says I need a moderator. Yeah, possibly I do. But it's very hard to do this with moderation. So I'm not going to quite frankly do that. So at the moment, but yes, it's possible. And somebody said, okay, let me, I know Ronnie is here, and she is the defense attorney, and defense attorney is going to say what defense attorneys say. And I'm not saying you're not a great defense attorney, Ms. I'm not sure what your last name is pronounced Rego, but I know your first name is Ronnie. You're maybe a fabulous defense attorney, and if I were Kathleen Folbigg, I might want you in my corner. However, you point out about, and it's a good question. She said, Ms. Ronnie Rego says, not one expert supporting this petition has been paid. And I'm okay. I understand that. I absolutely do understand that. And I'm not saying they were paid. I just find that I don't see any substantial scientific evidence that they should have supported this petition. For whatever reasons, maybe they're soft-hearted. Maybe they believe there is a genetic thing, although it hasn't been proven yet. Maybe people get very soft-hearted towards women, especially when the conversation goes to somebody's unjustly been in prison and she's lost all 4 children, and it's been a horrible, horrible thing that's happened to her. It's very hard a lot of times for people to see that it may be so. I'm a profiler. I take emotions out of the equation, but a lot of people, including scientists, can be very emotional about things, and especially can be swept away. And if they've seen something they think maybe could have contributed, even if it's this much, they're going to say, no, that's reasonable doubt. I don't think it is reasonable doubt. Now, if she hadn't written the diary, there would be less to convict her on. If she had only, let's say it was just one child, or maybe just the 2 girls that had that thing, and she hadn't written the diary, and people around her were like, yeah, she was a really caring mother. Maybe you could say, I don't know, because there's not enough circumstantial evidence to override the theoretical, minimal possibility of it's being genetic. But on the other hand, I'm going to say the scientific evidence is not at all robust at all. And I don't think that is enough to overturn the conviction. And by the way, and that was stated, I'm going to see if I can find the commentary on that particular issue. Let me see if I can find it. This is what it was turned down by the appeals court. Yeah, okay, this one. So this is somebody's opinion. The scientific evidence raised a theoretical, and that is a good word, possibility that there were innocent explanations for the deaths of the two girls. However, the judicial officer was required to consider evidence that, although the COM2 abnormality in Miss Folbigg and the two girls involved a change in an amino acid in the vicinity of GLY114, their circumstances departed from the reported cases of death associated with COM abnormalities. Again, their deaths did not represent any that have ever died of these abnormalities before. The change in the affected amino acid was not the same. The change was hereditary, and the girls had died at younger ages based on the evidence, not during exertion. So again, as I pointed out, these were babies, not older girls. It wasn't during exertion, a bunch of other stuff. Prior symptoms were absent, and Folbigg had not developed cardiac manifestations commonly associated with the genetic abnormality. Thus, the girls' deaths were outliers in comparison to those reported in scientific literature, the appeals court said. So yes, there was no real good reason to believe in this particular instance that this abnormality caused their deaths. It did not match any other deaths caused by this abnormality, nor were any of the symptoms, manifestations present in the mother or the two girls. So it's such a minimal possibility, so minimal, it's just truly theoretical that it can't outweigh all the massive circumstantial evidence. And that's why I stand by that she murdered her children. Let's see, let me go back up here. Oh, so many comments, and it's just hard to keep up with. All right. Let's see. What? Okay, I'm just going to run through things that are silly. Okay. I'm just going to run through this. All right. Oh, and Ronnie says also, just so you know, in over a week's time, the world will hear from actual experts. Oh, I see, Ronnie. So I'm not an expert. I'm a criminal profiler of 20 years, but I'm not an actual expert. Working pro bono, of course. Oh, they're all pro bono. About the diaries. They conclude that there are no confessions of murder. You know what? That got you knocked right off of my show. And I'll tell you why. Because you can't come onto my show and claim I'm not an expert. And that's why I'm basically an idiot, and I cannot understand what she wrote in those diaries. What you have done, pro bono, you found experts. I don't know why they're pro bono, but hey, you can always find them out there because people like their names used. People like to help people. They're going to say that these weren't confessions. And I'm going to say nonsense. So that's why you are now been blocked, because you weren't polite. I was polite to you, Ronnie. I said you were probably a very good defense attorney. I didn't attack you, but the minute you start saying real people, real experts, then you're gone, because it's my show and you don't get to insult me. Anyway, not that I'm not used to that happening. So let's see what else we have to say. Okay. No, it is not twisted. Condemning her in her diaries is twisted. No, it's not twisted. That is a thing called evidence. And you can be convicted on something because those are statements. Those are statements a person made about what happened to their children. So if you're going to say that, let's say you had a diary that a serial killer said, and then I saw that girl in the street, and I abducted her, and I raped her, and I stabbed her. And there's enough evidence in his description that matches the crime. That will get you convicted. So it's okay for dudes if they confess to a crime and give enough evidence that matches, that's okay. But a woman confesses to a crime, essentially, gives enough evidence that that she's confessing to the crime, and that's not okay. You see, that's a double standard right there. Okay, so there we go. And that's my opinion on that. Okay, let's see what we have to. It's not subjective. This is the thing. You're calling it subjective evidence. It's not subjective. She said herself the children wouldn't have died except for basically for her. That's not subjective. She is actually telling us that the children didn't die a natural death. She is telling us over and over again that the children died because of their behaviors and because of her behaviors. That's not subjective. That's objective. You can try to twist that any way you want, but I read enough. It's not like there was just one weird comment and you go, maybe she misstated. No, that's why I read so much of the diaries, because, and I don't even have the rest of the diaries, but she clearly says she didn't love her children. She wasn't bonded to her children. Her children were problematic to her, and her children died because of the problem. They were problematic to her. And she goes, I mean, there's so much there that I read to you. And if you can't see that she is confessing right there and then, I don't know what to say. Now you can try to say she imagined she killed them all, but again, she's confessing to homicide. She's confessing. So yeah, that's what I'm going to say. I went through them all and I explained it all to you, and I don't know what to say. That's not I'm not being subjective at all. I'm explained exactly what her words meant because she said it very clearly. Very clearly. Well, that too. Multiple babies of one mother dying is rare. That is true. That's and alone again. I go about this over and over again. Called totality of the evidence. The totality of the evidence. Whoops. Just hold on a second. I've lost my page here. The totality of the evidence. If it would have been one child, and she's, and there was just maybe one comment in a diary, you go, I don't know if we can convict on that. You may believe she did it, but you wouldn't convict on it. 4 children is a massive anomaly. 4 children, massive anomaly. And her behaviors all the way through her raising of the children are big red flags. And then the diary, which I believe is one confession after another confession after another confession, that the children died because they weren't cute enough, because they drove her nuts. The confessions are there. That's a totality of evidence, and so that's why she got convicted. So let's see what else we got here. Claudia says, this is a good point. Why not just give them away? Anyone would have taken those babies. She could have had them adopted. She has a huge ego and kills them to have that ego stroke. What a moron, mama's piece of shit. Well, people always say that. Why did the guy kill his pregnant girlfriend? Why didn't he just suck up and pay the bills? Why didn't a guy who kills his wife and children to go off with a lover, why doesn't he just get a divorce? And it's because, first of all, you got to deal with whatever you got to deal with. It doesn't go away. And secondly, because those things are objects in your life, you don't think you need to find them another place to stay. And she can't just give she's married. Her husband might like to keep the kids, He comes home and says, oh, my cute little baby. And she says, I want to give that baby up for adoption. He's probably saying, what are you talking about? It's my baby. He's probably not going to go along with it. And then, and then she's so, and then she, and, a lot of times there is that thrill of power and control from the people that when the child dies, you get all the attention. As I said, you get attention during the pregnancy, but then the child becomes annoying. And then when something's really annoying to you, to eliminate it can be pleasurable. So she might well have enjoyed every moment of that annoying child, that one she's having the battles of the wills with. You keep crying and I keep having to get up. You keep crying and I keep having to get up. Ha! I win. That's the way they think. That's the way they think. She wasn't betrayed by her husband. She's betrayed by her husband. So let me say, let's say your husband kills your 4 children and you finally find a diary that he says, I hated those little kids. You wouldn't turn that into the police. Now you realize that your wife murdered your 4 children. You wouldn't turn that in. She wasn't betrayed. She betrayed him. He trusted her to raise their children as he was trying to raise their children. He gave them CPR. He was trying to save his children. His wife murdered his 4 children. The one who betrayed was her, unless you're going to believe that she's totally innocent, which there's, as I say. And I am not. I am not interpreting the verses and selecting them to fit my opinion. Absolutely not. I will stand by that. All the words she said were clearly a confession of something violent happening to the children. She wasn't explaining crib death. She was explaining a violent end to those children. And I will stand by that. I explained that to you very well during the show. And if you're going to be blind to it, you're going to be blind to it. And, I can't stop you. But that's not true. It's unprofessional to, what? Make conclusions based on isolated. I've said a couple, it's a big deal. No, that is not unprofessional. And I'm going to end up blocking you. And I hate to ever do that. Do not call me unprofessional. It is not unprofessional. And I've dealt with you for a long time. You've been really nice. But if you're going to come here and call me unprofessional, you're going to end up getting knocked off of here too. And I will do it because there's no reason for doing that. I've explained as a profiler. I do a thing called statement analysis, and I did statement analysis. If you don't like my statement analysis, you are welcome to not like it. But calling me unprofessional because I have professionally analyzed her statements is uncalled for. And I will stand by that. I will stand by that. So I'm going to look for somebody sound that's I'm going to look for something else here. If there's anything worth talking about, because because I just the inability of human beings to talk about, to be able to understand somebody having a differing opinion and not finding that highly, highly offensive to them. I know that may be your problem. I mean, if you get that that angry with me because I have a professional opinion that differs from what you believe, well, I think that's an issue you need to deal with, because I don't go berserk on people because they have a different opinion than me. I don't call them nasty names, and I don't call them unprofessional. I don't call them not you're a fraud or whatever because they have a different opinion. So there you go. So I will stand by my statements because I think I clearly explain them. I spent a lot of time in the show going through all of them, so I clearly explain them, and I will stand by them. So unless I see anything else worthwhile talking about here, I will then end the show because thank you. There we go. Thank you, Jess, the voice of reason. There we go. Ronnie's still not in the chat because I have not blocked her because she had the indecency to call me bad names. And I didn't call her a bad name. I could say, here's something I could say. I could say, well, Ronnie, you're willing to support a murderer and try to get a murder out. I didn't even say that. She's a defense attorney. She's doing her job as a defense attorney. Now, I have issues about defense attorneys doing some of the work that they do. I personally, ethically couldn't do it. But there is that rule that the person has a right to an attorney, and people think they can provide that service. And I will not personally attack them because they have an opinion or they're doing their job. Unless I really feel like unless they've been totally unethical in doing the job, I'm not going to say anything because they have the right to do that. So I'm just going to run through all of this because I see so many silly things here now. So people are the other thing that's going to happen. Thank you, Emily. Thank you very much. I hope it's a great session. I mean, one thing I will never do, and people know me, I'll never do this. I will look at the evidence and I will analyze the evidence and I will tell you what my professional expert opinion is, what I've determined. And I will not play I don't want people to be pissed off at me game. You'll notice a lot of people come on who have a YouTube channel and they're very cautious about what they say. They hem and haw. They go, well, it could be this. And it's all those things she said in her diary were interesting. But, I don't want to, the genetic thing's also interesting. They'll go do that because they don't want the hate. They don't want to lose their subscribers. I'm not going to play that game. I mean, I won't. I am going to analyze the case as I see the evidence supports. And I'll always do that. And if you disagree with me, you have the right to. You don't want to follow me. You don't have to be my subscriber. You can go away. I know it's YouTube. No one's keeping you here. But that is my opinion, and I stand by it. I studied the cases, and I can't come up with innocence in the particular case of Kathleen Folbigg. I cannot. and I won't. So there you go. Oh, so this person, see, they say, do I have any? I've got to block that user too. Oh, some lovely people, so some lovely people. So at any rate, I'm going to stop the show now because now we just see people. Oh, thank you, Lisa. Thank you for tackling these emotional cases and giving an opinion backed up with your reasons. Much appreciated. And I try to, and when I do the reasons, Lisa, it's not, people say, oh, it's just subjective. No, that's why I went through each one of them and explained why I believe what the evidence shows. It's just not my subjective view that the genetic information isn't strong enough. There simply isn't much evidence that genetic information is strong enough. I mean, it just isn't there. I mean, I looked for papers. I looked for, I don't know, 200 people. There was all these different babies dying, and I'm not seeing any of that. I see a couple mice. A couple mice have, that is not science. I really feel very strongly about scientific stuff. But the science isn't actually proving it. If it's just some vague theory that people are studying, and studying they should, by the way, I'm not objecting to the study, but they haven't come to any level of true scientific proof to then use that for this case. And I will stand by that. And I will stand by my statement analysis because it's very strong evidence, and that's why she got convicted. So and there I am. So anyway, good night, Annie. You're most welcome. It was a very interesting case to do, and there we have it. So, disagree with me if you will, agree with me if you will, but at least somebody needs to be out here, and also, somebody needs to be able to stand up and give an opinion that isn't dictated by fear and popularity and I don't do things out of fear or popularity. I do things because that's what the evidence tells me. And there may be somebody else who's going to say the evidence said something different to them, and they may present that. That's why I pointed out a number of different experts like Ken Maines. I pointed out his quite often. I pointed out Peter Hyatt. And the reason I point them out is not because we always totally agree. It's because at least they present things and give their explanations for why they believe the evidence says what they think it says. And I don't think they're being subjective either. I think they are being objective and analyzing the evidence. And even if they come up with something different than me, I'm not going to say, oh, you're being subjective, but I'm objective. No, I think they're objective too. I think that sometimes the problem is evidence is difficult and an expert does their best. And sometimes we don't 100% agree. And so there's nothing wrong with you receiving information from two different experts. And sometimes one expert may be right and the other expert may be wrong. Sometimes it's going to be a gray area forever. But if we cannot have civil conversations and we cannot be able to discuss things civilly, to be able to try to learn and understand without the massive emotion I see coming out of people, that they're so damn angry. Now, what amazes me in many of these cases that I see people getting extremely emotional about, they do not know Kathleen Folbigg. They're not her family. They're not her friends. The same thing with the Gabby Petito case. They don't know Gabby from from anybody. These are people miles away that have no clue, don't know who Gabby is. Madeleine McCann was a cute little, almost 4-year-old girl. And yes, she lost her life. But people get so attached emotionally to a child they don't know, to an adult they do not know. I'd say take that energy and put it into your neighborhood, put it into your community, people you can actually touch, and help your victims in your community, help your police, help the children of your community. Put your energies there and not into as much as I want people to watch my YouTube channel and in this internet space. If too much energy goes out there, it could be used in a better way. But the reason I do these shows is to promote education. This is an educational channel. I'm trying to educate people about the different issues of profiling and investigation and crime scene analysis. That's what I'm doing here. It's an education channel. If you don't wish to be educated, you can go someplace else. And I do recommend that you get educated by a number of different people. Just like you read different books, you go to different colleges, you have different professors. They don't always agree, but they're educating. And if you're coming here to to blast people, to get angry, to get emotional, you're in the wrong place. And that's just the way it is. You're in the wrong place. You can do it in the comments, but you're still in the wrong place. And so, and I do my best to try to keep things civil. I do not have a moderator. I block people if I find them to be offensive. And when you put in comments below, which you're welcome to put comments below, again, to have a discussion. If I see that you're being rude, I'll just block you off the channel completely, because it doesn't help anybody to be rude. It doesn't help anybody to be so angry and have to say nasty things about each other. I don't understand. If you think that is necessary, you have a problem. Maybe you have a personality disorder. So think about that. Now, what is it in you that makes you have to be this angry and nasty because you don't agree with me? Because I'm not feeling that way towards you. So, but anyway, I thank you all for being here. It's been a very interesting case. One I didn't even know about until recently, because I was asked to look into it, and I have looked into it, and I found it fascinating. And in the profiling school that I'll be running, I'll be doing some commentary. I'll be doing different issues. The Munchausen Syndrome by Proxy will be something I will be talking about, and not so much of this kind of, it won't be live. I'll be doing very structured classes so that you can learn about these things, and then you can take them with you if you're a detective, if you're a journalist, if you're studying profiling, if you're just somebody who wants to understand more about crime scene analysis and profiling and crime in general. And I'll be starting that fairly soon. I have to start working to get all the different classes together. So, but I am looking forward to doing that. So at any rate, it has been interesting to be here. And I'm sorry I didn't get to answer more of your questions, but when people are going crazy like that, it's very hard to actually have discussions. So now I always talk with people if they're civil, but this seems like a little crazy over here. So I'm just going to say, I can't answer as many today, not because I'm afraid to answer them, but because I don't get into big fat arguments. So anyway, thank you for being here. I did enjoy it in spite of everything. And hopefully I will see you, if you're a Patreon, I'll see you on Wednesday. So I think it's going to be Wednesday at maybe 7 o'clock. Be a Patreon get together, the hangout with Pat Brown. If you have some more questions you want to ask and you're part of Patreon, you can link below. You can join Patreon. You can send me questions, and you can also bring your questions there. And we have our hangout where we can, a small group of people I can chat with, and it's always very pleasant and fun. So also again, if you haven't decided you hate me because I personally think she's guilty, then do subscribe to the channel, like, share, and hit the bell. So see you next time.